Spaced repetition, the best way to learn anything fast, backed by science. Spaced repetition was my superpower during medical school. It allowed me to learn so fast that I had plenty of time for other things like starting a YouTube channel, producing music, and building RemNote, all during my training. The science behind spaced repetition can be quite complicated, but honestly, you can watch any other video on the internet for that. But in this video, I'm cutting straight through all that fluff and I'm giving you real-life applications. 11 ways to use spaced repetition step by step to get better grades. In a nutshell, spaced repetition is simply spacing out your studies. It's the opposite of cramming, which means that all the benefits are also the opposite. At the end of this video, I'll talk about the most common mistakes that students make when using spaced repetition so that you can avoid it. But for now, let's get into the list. So I see spaced repetition in 3 different tiers. The higher you go, the more benefits you get, but also the more complex it is to apply. Tier 1 is the basics. You don't get the full effects, but it's easy to get started and you can start right after this video. So the first way to use spaced repetition is delayed review. And this is based on the science of memory decay. When you first learn something, give it some time to marinate. Allow yourself to actually forget some of the material. That way, the next time you review it, you'll struggle a bit more, but retention will be way higher. More effort equals more retention. So here's an example of what you could do with your class schedule. After you go to your first math lecture, just let the material sit and do something else, like maybe preview the history lecture for tomorrow's history class. Then tomorrow you can go to history lecture. But after that, leave history alone. Now that some time has passed since you've seen math, you can go back and do, say, the math homework or math review. Then maybe you can preview science, and then you can do the history homework, and then back to science, and then back to math again, and so on and so on. You're delaying your review, allowing for some space to happen between repetitions. The second method here is interleaving your topics. So it's kind of like the first method where you're spacing your subjects across multiple days. This method spaces your subjects across a single study day. So let's say you plan to study 3 chapters today. Instead of studying in blocks, as in only studying chapter 1 in the morning, only studying chapter 2 in the afternoon, and only studying chapter 3 in the evening, you can try breaking up the blocks and interleaving them. So for example, we could study chapter 1 in the morning, afternoon, and evening. With block study, your brain can completely forget about chapter 1 after the morning. But with interleaving, your brain is forced to hold on to chapter 1 material even while studying for chapters 2 and 3, and this allows you to make connections between all the chapters. So the next time you plan to study for an entire day, like cramming for a test, try out this method. You're basically applying spacing to your cramming. So the next method is end of day review. According to the science of memory, we tend to forget more than half of what we learned within a day. So a good time to review newly learned material is to do a refresher at the end of the day. If you watched my other video about 12 ways to use active recall, then this is a great time to run through the questions that you wrote in class. It's okay if you can't remember everything, you can always review it at a later repetition. But the things you can recall will be better ingrained in your memory. Let's move on to the next tier. In tier 2 spacing, you're adding the idea that each repetition should be done in increasing intervals. The reason here is because, again, it mimics the science of memory decay. An easy way to demonstrate this is the Shoebox Method, also known as the Outliner system. The way it works is that you have 4 or 5 boxes. Items in box 1 is studied every day, box 2 is studied every other day, and so on as you see here. Box 5 is retired, meaning that you already know all that material well enough and you can just quickly review it right before the test. So to start, place your study topics into box 1. A lot of people use flashcards, but you can put whatever you like. Past papers, problem sets, whatever. Every time you get a topic right, you move it up 1 box. Every time you get a topic wrong, you move it all the way back to box 1. This ensures that you study your weaker topics more often. And this method is highly customizable. For example, you can come up with your own intervals, or you can move your wrong topics back just 1 box instead of all the way back to the beginning for a less punishing schedule. The next method is using a Kanban board. You can think of it similar to the Shoebox Method, but done on your electronic device rather than with physical cards. The columns will act as the boxes, and after you review an item, you can move it along to the next box or column accordingly. There are a number of apps that enable you to do this. Some free ones that come to mind are Trello and Notion. The next method is to use a study timetable, also known as a prospective revision timetable. The idea is that you're scheduling your repetitions ahead of time in your calendar. So you have the dates in the first column, and then you can fill in your study topics. If you want to be more detailed, you can even put time in the first column. A common spacing interval is to double the days. So for example, if you're studying chapter 1 on this day, then the next time you'll study it is 2 days later, then 4 days later, then 8, then 16, and so on. Or if you want to get really fancy, you can try using the Fibonacci sequence. There's another method for timetables, and that would be the retrospective revision timetable. It's basically the reverse. Instead of having the dates in the first column, you put the study topic in the first column. And every time you review a topic, you rank it based on how well you knew it. So let's say that I studied chapter 1 on January 1st, and I felt like I knew it well. I'd highlight it in green. For me, yellow is medium, and then red means I don't know it very well. So unlike the other timetable, for this one, we don't plan out the schedule ahead of time. We just choose what we want to study that day based on which topics are the weakest, or based on which topics we haven't studied in a while. You just keep studying every day until all your topics turn green as you approach your exam. The obvious advantage of this method is that you're studying based on your strengths and your weaknesses. The next method takes the idea of retrospective revision and applies it not just to your study topics, but to individual concepts within the topic. For example, instead of deciding to study for the topic of pharmacology, I'm zooming in and studying individual facts from that chapter. This method works well using an outliner note-taking app because you can go down your list of concepts and you can highlight the questions based on how well you know them. Or you can use emojis if you wanted to. If you're using a note-taking app with a tagging feature, like RemNote for example, instead of highlighting, you can tag the concept. This way, you can later do a quick focus review on your weaknesses right before your test by choosing to study specific tags. So let's move on to tier 3. These next methods I'm about to share will give you maximum spaced repetition benefits. So in tier 2, the intervals are increasing, but the optimal spacing is having the intervals adjust to you. Your understanding of topics can fluctuate, so the intervals for specific topics can get longer or shorter based on how well you know that topic. And this can get extremely complicated, but luckily we have spaced repetition algorithms. Think of it like the YouTube algorithm. It recommends videos that it thinks you'll enjoy based on your personal watch history. Well, in the same way, spaced repetition algorithms will recommend specific topics for you to study based on your personal mastery of those topics at that moment in time. So this next method is to use an app with built-in spaced repetition algorithms. Some of the old school ones are SuperMemo and Anki, but nowadays there are plenty of other options with all sorts of aesthetics and gamification. The next method is custom spaced repetition within a note-taking app. So there's been a recent trend of people trying to build spaced repetition algorithms directly into a note-taking app like Notion or Roam Research. I admire the creativity of these DIY algorithms, but the main downside here is that it requires some form of plugin or add-on or custom coding that you have to do yourself, which can make it very complicated if you don't know what you're doing. Personally, I think it's a lot of work and hassle to go through just to achieve makeshift spaced repetition. I mean, you can pack on as much muscle as you want, a diglet is still just a diglet. Which takes us to the last method, and in my biased opinion, the best way to implement spaced repetition, and that is by using RemNote. It's currently the only note-taking app out there that has spaced repetition algorithms built into the core product itself. No plugins, no coding, it's just seamless. We've built our own RemNote algorithm, but you can also switch to the traditional Anki algorithm or customize your own based on your preferences. Matty and I have been using spaced repetition throughout medical school and our careers, so with our awesome team, we've optimized RemNote through years of personal experience. RemNote does something that no other note-taking app can do. It automatically generates spaced repetition flashcards from the notes that you take, so it completely removes the time-intensive step of transferring your notes to flashcards. Just imagine if Anki and Notion had a baby, and that baby got a PhD in productivity. And I say productivity because there are a ton of other features built into RemNote that save you time during your studies. As I mentioned before, achieving tier 3 of spaced repetition can get pretty complicated, but I firmly believe that everyone should be using spaced repetition to learn. And RemNote is our way of making this technology accessible to everyone, which is why RemNote will always be free for you to start using. Now let's talk about the biggest mistake that students make when using spaced repetition. And that is, you gotta combine spaced repetition with active recall. So if you're using spaced repetition to space out how many times you reread your notes or rewatch your lectures, then you're missing the point. When it comes to studying, active recall is what you do and spaced repetition is how you do it. They go hand in hand, like sword and shield. Which means the best study strategies are some combination of methods in this video and methods mentioned in our previous active recall video. Whether it's combining retrospective timetables with practice problems, or the Shoebox Method with mind maps, or spaced repetition algorithms with flashcards, you want to mix and match based on what type of subject you're trying to study for. So for a refresher, check out 12 different ways to use active recall, and you can watch it right